My name's Dominique. My degree is Masters of Clinical Psychology and PhD in Clinical Psychology, and my area of research is around very early development, and I've been doing my PhD in conjunction with the autism team at Telephone Kids Institute. So I guess it was a bit of a slow process coming to deciding to do postgraduate studies in psychology. I did a number of different things in undergrad and was definitely always interested in the psychology units, but sort of consolidated that interest along the way as I started working in the sort of developmental space. So I started working with children with autism and became quite interested in that as a field of work. And after honours, went to work with Telephone Kids for a bit, and really that sort of increased my interest in both the clinical and research sort of sides of psychological work and developmental work as well, and obviously enough for me to decide to go back and do a postgraduate degree. I think it was a bit of a decision deciding whether or not I wanted to do a PhD, because it's quite an undertaking, and I had some awareness of how much of an undertaking it was, although possibly not a complete awareness of how long and how drawn out a process it can be. But I think that my interest really was very much around the developing psychological space, so seeing that for whatever clinical area I looked at in psychology, there was so much that was constantly changing and developing, and so much that was new, and so many possible fields of research that had yet to be developed or were constantly developing. And I found that really interesting, and sort of all the questions around that and how we can improve services and improve clinical services in particular for people, I found really interesting and something I wanted to be a part of. So I think that's sort of what tipped the decision to doing a PhD. So my decision to select my supervisor was possibly not how many students come to it, but I was working in a team, and my boss then is who my supervisor is now. So the head of the team that I was working for, and I really liked the work that the team was doing, so it was sort of a bit of a easy decision in that respect. The biggest challenge is just well, for me, doing the combined degree was a very big challenge. So maintaining a focus on the PhD when you're doing the Masters alongside it is very difficult. I found that very difficult. I found the switching between the two hard to build momentum for the PhD. So that was a sort of a big challenge in terms of sort of having to constantly come back to it and pick it up again. And I think the timelines you have in your head don't necessarily match up to what you're physically able to do week to week when you do have all those things on. Plus, once you sort of add work and everything into the mix, it can be a lot to have on your plate between the different tasks you have to complete and the different assignments. And I think because the PhD is so self-driven and you're so reliant on yourself to make sure you're meeting deadlines and achieving what you want to achieve, when there are other things that are sort of more short-term and front of mind, it can be easy to have the PhD sit by the side at those times. And so I think that the motivation, I suppose, to keep going and pick it back up again and again is probably one of the harder parts of the PhD. Just that motivation to keep going. I'd say for me that was the harder part of it. I guess the most important thing I learnt during the PhD was that I guess you can have a go at anything. I think with a PhD, when you start and everything seems completely overwhelming in some ways, because you've got this enormous project and there's so many new things that you know nothing about and you don't even know how to go about learning them. It can be quite intimidating. So probably the sort of thing that I feel a lot more confidence in now is not necessarily that I know how to do all these things, but that I can figure out how to at least start those things and how to source the information and the supervision and the expertise when I don't. And I think, I guess if you're considering doing a PhD or study in general, the love of learning and the appreciation for being able to understand things more and understand things better is definitely a part of it. So I think it's certainly not day to day that I have always loved the PhD and loved that sort of side of it, but on the good days, being able to, slowly learn a bit more about a field has really been something I've appreciated. I probably wouldn't have done a combined degree. I think it was not the best way to be able to turn up and focus on the different components of it. It was a decision I made for all sorts of reasons, including financial ones, so it was the best decision for me at the time, but it's been challenging. But at the point I'm at now, it's easier because I am sort of past the hardest part of balancing those things now that I'm done with the masters. So it's a bit easier for me to look back on it, I suppose, now that I have gotten through the worst of it. But I think as well, possibly with the PhD, something I would have done differently was take a bit more ownership of it from early on. I think it can be quite a mental switch to go from undergrad, where very much the type of learning that you're doing and what you're focusing on is very directed and sort of set out for you, to postgrad, where you really do get to have a lot more say in the direction that you want your research and the questions you're asking and what you're contributing to go, where you want it to go and what you want it to look like, and sort of taking ownership of that is a great thing to be able to do. So knowing that you sort of have license to do that from earlier on, and obviously you're doing that with advice and supervision, all those sorts of things, so you have the supports there, but I think that may be something that I would have done a bit differently. I was pretty lucky in that I was because I was in the clinical course, I had a cohort who were going through the same experience as me, so being able to lean on them throughout the process was definitely something that was very helpful. I think one of the sort of harder learning curves was around the PhD being such a big job, I suppose, and being able to fragment it and break it down and then actually just treat it like a job that you leave at work was something that, once I was able to do a bit better, was able to manage the stress a bit better. So I guess day to day just being a bit easier on yourself, and you're not going to finish the PhD today, and accepting that and being okay with that. Just all the things that really help with stress, being able to have a life outside of study and outside of work, to make sure there's a bit of balance there as much as you can. Well, my original plans pre-COVID were post-PhD submission. I was going to go backpacking in South America for 6 months, which obviously is not happening. So my plans currently are very much, I'm starting work soon clinically, so being able to not have my spare time taken up by the PhD is what I'm looking forward to, I suppose. I guess in the lead up to the submission, it's a bit of a strange point of the PhD, because I think there's points in the PhD where it really never feels like I was, the end's anywhere in sight or like anywhere close. So I guess being at the stage where you are planning for submission is quite weird, to be like, oh, it's actually nearly done, and it can be hard because you do things so many times, and you build on stuff so much that when it gets to the point where people are like, oh yep, you're done with this, you can submit this and you can submit that, and you're heading towards the end, it's a bit strange to be at that stage. So it's a bit surreal, I suppose, but I'm very much looking forward to having the weight off in some ways. I guess the advice I would give is to very much think about whether the PhD is for you, in terms of I think there's a lot of rewarding aspects of doing the PhD. It can be really wonderful to learn so much and to be able to contribute to a field. I guess I would say you choose wisely in terms of both the field that you're wanting to do the PhD in, as well as sort of who you have around you in terms of supervision, and really make sure that you're doing a PhD that you care about and that you're passionate about, because there's going to be a lot of day-to-day grind that is slower and harder, and I guess you need to have that passion for the topic that you're working on to get you through those times. So I guess where I'm sitting now, sort of towards the end, it's a bit easier to feel like I would do it all again, because it's easier to sort of look at all the valuable parts of it and how much I have learnt and how much I have appreciated being able to work in the fields I've worked in. Probably wouldn't have had the same response every day of my PhD, and maybe a year or two ago I would not have been valuing the experience quite so much on some of the harder days. But I think where I'm at now, yes, I would do it all again. I've very much appreciated how much I've been able to learn and where it's been able to get me. That's probably one of the hardest questions. So at the moment I'm starting clinical work soon, and the process of deciding sort of which direction to go in with that has actually been very hard. I guess when you work in a broader field, choosing the smaller direction to head in, at least as a first step, for me has been hard anyway, making the decisions around which parts of a field I find very interesting as a whole I want to focus on. So I'm not 100% sure what my dream job is and where I want to end up. So hopefully that means I'll be happy in a number of different eventual jobs, but I think what I've been able to identify through the process of doing the clinical and research degrees is that I am sort of very passionate about working in a space where I can work with people in general and in psychological capacity. So at the moment I'm most interested in heading in a clinical direction, but I very much appreciate that I have a better understanding of the research process and how that integrates into the clinical process. And I guess when I picture sort of 5-10 years in the future, I would very much like to be involved in some ways in clinical research, in ways that can help improve clinical services. And I think that that's sort of, I guess ideally where I picture myself eventually.